What if I told you that Monkey D. Luffy has already visited the Ancient Kingdom? Jaya plus Skypiea plus Shandora plus Onigashima equals the Ancient Kingdom. This super landmass or super continent was known as Pangaea and dominated the entire planet. And it took a continent pooler specifically to scatter this super continent. I was running around my room like an absolute madman when I realized all of this because it goes so much deeper than that. And I don't want to spoil the whole theory right away, but I promise you this gets really deep, it gets really crazy, and this video is going to be like a roller coaster ride. I put my heart and soul into my YouTube channel and videos, so if you appreciate it, please like and subscribe for more S tier One Piece theories. Before we jump into it, there's a few content creators I have to shout out because I share similar beliefs to them. They're not one-to-one, they're not the exact same, but they're pretty similar, and I don't want you to think I'm stealing their concepts. Some examples are Wizard of Oars, Flying Panda, Joe 3 Skull Theories, etc. These guys are geniuses, they're scholars, huge shout out to them. No hate, no funny business going on. So to jump into this, we know that there is a great kingdom, there is an ancient kingdom that's very important to the story of One Piece. Whether it holds the truth of the Devil Fruits, the D-Clan, Joy Boy, etc., there's an ancient kingdom that was destroyed by 20 kingdoms coming together. This is very important because they left behind historical texts known as poneglyphs detailing what happened to them in the Void Century. And there's a lot of clues that this ancient kingdom was split up given all of the context in the story. Looking at Onigashima, poneglyphs, Shandora, it's very clear to me that the ancient kingdom wasn't necessarily destroyed, but more so scattered. And going with the thought that they were scattered, I'd argue that they were actually one piece, one super continent that we'll call Pangaea. So we need to address the specific parts that go into the super continent, this ancient kingdom known as Pangaea. Starting with Jaya, it actually still remains today, and it's on the ocean. Like, you could go to Jaya today, it has its beliefs, you know, the Emerald City, all types of stuff. Jaya still remains to this day. Then we know that Shandora was knocked into the sky by the Knockup Stream. Then we had a whole arc of Skypiea, all the clouds and the islands. We have these pieces set into place. Well, we know that there's one key location, the right eye, that I believe to be Onigashima. Now, this whole plotline of collective islands coming together to form something special was already placed into the story, because during the Skypiea arc, Nami was talking to the Straw Hat saying, hey guys, have you noticed that the map of Jaya is Jaws, and if you attach it to Skypiea, it makes a skull? Clearly, Oda's trying to depict something here, and I would argue that this depiction is in fact the Ancient Kingdom. But at this point in time, we don't actually know what the left eye is or what the right eye is. And I find it funny how through the whole Skypiea arc, there's so much foreshadowing and parallels between Enel and Imu. Both of them had 5 followers, both of them killed off a winged race, and both of them think that they're gods. And even at a microscopic level, I find it funny how the Arc Maxim literally has a world government symbol on it. Yeah, they might have made the blueprints or something like that, but I think that this is further foreshadowing Enel being Imu in so many ways. Sorry to go off topic, let's go back to this huge skull known as the Ancient Kingdom. So after Nami points out that this skull is an existing thing, later on in the arc, Robin actually finds the left missing eye. This eye will be known as Shandora because Robin cut open the clouds and landed into a mysterious location that no one was able to find. She said it was Shandora, and it fits perfectly with the left eye of the skull. You can see the monuments there, the simple details, the poneglyphs. It is very clear that Shandora is the left eye of Skypiea. So at this point we have the jaws, the skull, and the left eye, which leads us to wonder where the hell the right eye is. And again, I strongly believe it's Onigashima because of what I'm about to tell you. So after Robin cut open the clouds, she's walking around reading poneglyphs talking about the history of Shandora. It was basically eradicated, they got rid of the books, all that type of stuff. But Robin comes across a poneglyph that is a dead giveaway proving Onigashima is the missing eye. So the poneglyph that Robin found reads, "We are the recorders of history, existing in harmony with the sound of the great bell." We can break this down piece by piece to prove that the Kazukis and Shandorians were once together. So when it says that we are the recorders of history, we know for a fact that it's referencing the Kazukis, because during Zou, when Luffy was in the whale tree, they said that the Kazukis date way back to the Void Century, and they're the reason that poneglyphs were even made. It's because of the Kazukis that they can read them, carve them, all that type of stuff, and through the poneglyphs, history is made. The Kazukis are the weavers of history, they are the recorders of history through the poneglyphs. Furthermore, it says existing in harmony. The key word here is actually in harmony. If you take the name Wano Kuni, it's actually a Japanese pun for country in harmony. So if you look at it now, we are the recorders of history, the Kazuki, existing in harmony, Wano country, with the sound of the great bell. And the final piece to this puzzle is the great bell. It's definitely referencing the Shandorian golden bell that Luffy hit Enel into, because way back in Nolan's flashback, we see Nolan come to Shandora. Back then it was still a city of gold, but most importantly, that exact same bell was still there. And while Shandora was knocked into the sky, the golden bell was separated from Shandora. So we can break this down one more time. We are the recorders of history, the Kozuki, existing in harmony Wano Kuni with the sound of the great bell Shandora. And you have to question, how would the Kozukis be even connected with Shandora? The Kozukis and Wanos all the way across the world are in the New World. How would they have that connection? The simple argument is that Onigashima, this great landmass, was the right eye of the ancient kingdom. And this also plays into dialogue that we got during the Wano arc. Yukimaru says that in the past, Wano was known as a country of gold. We know for a fact that Shandora was literally and called the city of gold, so it would make sense if Onigashima / Wano was the missing eye of the ancient kingdom. Now that we established that Onigashima is the missing eye, we have to answer how that even happened. And again, the answer is very simple and obvious because Oda already told us. We met Oars in Thriller Bark and he was named a continent pooler. But I would argue that this Oars in Thriller Bark wasn't the one that did that with Onigashima. I'd argue it was someone before him. Allow me to break it down. So we know for a fact that Oars in Thriller Bark was called a continent pooler and he was over 500 years old. But I feel like if he was 650, 660, they would have said over 600 years old. I feel like the phrasing over 500 means that he's between 500 and 600 years old, meaning that there's no way that this Oars was around during the Void Century. And we also know that he had a son named Little Oars Jr. that's only 72 years old. So looking at their ages, there's no way that either of them was from the Void Century. And there's actually another clue proving that the person before Oars was the original Oars, which we'll call Oars 1, and he was around during the Void Century. So during Marineford, when Little Oars Jr. pulls up, we see that his pirate flag says Oars 3. I would argue that Oda and the world government is hiding the fact that Oars Jr. is actually Oars the 3rd, meaning the Oars we saw in Thriller Bark is actually Oars Jr., meaning that there's a secret Oars 1 we have yet to see, or have we? And this original Oars 1 is the skull on Onigashima. Now I know the popular argument is that the skull is an Oni because the island is called Onigashima, but I think it's only called that because Kaido named it that way. We know that at one point Marco says Onigashima, is that what they call it now? Inferring that it actually had a different name, and I believe that different name was the name Oars. And even in the context of Onis do not get that big, but we know that ancient giants are absolutely massive, and the ancient giant race Oars did have horns. So you cannot prove that there's ancient Onis or giant Onis, but you can prove that there's ancient giants with horns. So you'd be led to believe that this skull on Onigashima is the true Oars 1, and he was the continent pooler that pulled Onigashima out of the right eye of Pangaea. And he's the reason why the Oars race is known as the continent pooler race. And I'd even go as far as to argue that this Oars 1 on Onigashima is in fact Joy Boy. I believe during the Void Century and the fall of the ancient kingdom, Joy Boy had no choice but to scatter some of the ancient kingdom. The reason for this is not only for the Kozukis, but to preserve some of the ancient kingdom. It's not a reach to say that huge skull sitting there on Onigashima was able to lift the island. And we could even look at Kaido during the raid as foreshadowing for that. Somehow during the raid, Kaido was able to use his dragon form and his flame clouds to move Onigashima, so I'd be led to believe that this notorious figure, this huge, important, prominent person in the story was able to do it as well. Maybe not through flame clouds or brute strength, but in some way, shape, or form, Joy Boy would have been able to move Onigashima. And since the Kozukis are the recorders of history, it makes a lot of sense that Joy Boy would do this for the Kozukis. And this would also explain why Wano not only has an ancient weapon Pluton, but multiple poneglyphs. Now to quickly jump back why I believe Oars 1 was Joy Boy, there's a lot of foreshadowing already proving this. So looking at Marineford War, we got a lot of intel on Little Oars Jr. One thing that we learned is he was actually friends with Ace, and he had a straw hat made because the sun was too hot given that he was really tall. I believe this correlates and parallels with Luffy because Luffy is the sun god yet wears a straw hat. This is the type of thing that Oda does all the time in the story, and given that you reread and pay attention, you would pick up on this and be like, wow, I see what Oda's trying to do here. And then this also connects to how Oars and Thriller Bark had Luffy's shadow. So in a way, Gecko Moria didn't even notice, but this Oars having Luffy's shadow was in a way bringing back Joy Boy. So seeing how Little Oars Jr. and Oars both tie into Joy Boy, Luffy, and Sun God Nika in some way, shape, or form, I believe that Oda is doing this because the one before him, Oars 1, was Joy Boy. And not only that, during the Reverie, we see that Imu visited a giant straw hat that was in a freezer, and it was an ominous event that has to mean something great in the grand scheme of the story. Why would they put a hat in a freezer? That makes no sense. Do you put your baseball hat in a freezer? I don't think so. I believe the reason that Imu did this is because all throughout the story, giants and ancient giants were put into freezers. They were frozen and kept safe for various reasons, but I believe this is the reason why Imu put that hat in there. And a lot of people, including myself, believe that the hat actually belongs to Joy Boy, which would explain why Imu had Luffy's poster when he visited the hat. So it would make sense that Imu had the poster of the new Joy Boy with a straw hat visiting Oars 1, aka Joy Boy, with the old straw hat. And given that the hat was really big, this infers that the hat was for a big person such as an ancient giant. Sure, if you put that hat on top of the skull in Onigashima, it would probably be small, but given when Luffy goes gigantic mode, his clothes become bigger, I would argue that if Nika, aka Joy Boy, had that fruit and he had that straw hat that Imu has on him, the hat would become bigger as well. So with all this info of Little Oars Jr., Oars 1, the skull in Onigashima, the hat that Imu has, the continent puller, I strongly believe that there was an Oars 1 that was known as Joy Boy and his skull remains on Onigashima. And I bet Oda's laughing really hard at us because to me this is very blatant and this is very obvious, and Oda's just right in our face laughing at us, toying with us. This theory's not over yet, but I want to give a quick recap. So basically Joy Boy, aka Oars, continent pulled Pangaea apart during the Void Century, most likely to scatter information just like how the poneglyphs were. And there's actually another hint as to why the ancient kingdom was called Pangaea, and the reason why, the answer why, is on Mary Geoise itself. Looking around Mary Geoise, you can see that the current world government decided to name their castle Pangaea Castle. I think this is really funny because yeah, sure, the world government is making people think that the world's coming together under one government, under one kind of unity, but that's not true at all. The Gorosei don't believe in this 20 kingdoms, this 20 swords plotline. They believe in the 5 Gorosei plus Imu. It's not the world coming together. That's not their belief. They don't believe in Pangaea. And I would even argue that they called it Pangaea to spit in the face of the ancient kingdom and the D-clan. The whole world is not in unity. There is no super continent known as Pangaea. That is not Mary Geoise. It's all a facade. But you know what would be Pangaea? Jaya plus Shandora plus Onigashima plus Skypiea creating the ancient kingdom. If you're still not convinced with this theory, here's the kicker because you're going to be mind blown. So in all sorts of media, there's something known as a title drop or a titular drop. That's when like a manga or a book or a movie has a character say through dialogue the name of the book or movie. Seeing how there was once this big skull of scattered islands, I would argue that One Piece is going to have a title drop where they point out how Jaya plus Shandora plus Onigashima plus Skypiea was all put together in one piece. And it took a continent puller to disrupt this one piece that was known as the Ancient Kingdom. So basically in this story, there was a supercontinent known as Pangaea and their leader was Joy Boy. But this supercontinent was pulled apart by a continent puller and it was no longer one piece. With the return of Joy Boy, Monkey D. Luffy is going to unite the world and bring everyone together again to create the One Piece. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and share this video with a friend. It took a lot of time and effort to make, but it was still fun. There's a video to my side. Make sure to check it out. Banger theory right there. But thank you guys so much. Take care. Peace.